Welcome to the Reddit stories. r/Askreddit. What has been the most destructive lie in human history? Thomas Medgley and General Motors lying that exposure to tetraethyl lead is harmless. Tetraethyl lead was a gasoline additive present in all gasoline sold in the US until it was banned in the 70s. Almost every child growing up from 1920 to 1970 had lead poisoning to some degree. Entire generations grew up with their minds being poisoned, unable to reach their potentials because of him. Not to mention the secondary effects. Lead exposure is associated with criminal behaviors. Same guy also created freon, which caused the hole in the ozone layer. An environmental historian said that Thomas Medgley had a more adverse impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism in Earth's history. Radium paint isn't poisonous. Thousands of watch dial workers in the US used to apply radium brushes on their tongues to paint numbers on watch dials, and almost all of these workers were women. As these workers were dying due to radiation poisoning, the companies brought in fake doctors and convinced the victims and their families that they have venereal diseases like syphilis. As this was mostly affecting women, most were scared to share it with their families for fear of retaliation and abandonment. The suffering endured by these women was extremely awful. Their jaws fell off, their bones fractured, their hair was lost, and most lost eyesight until their eventual painful death. These women were called radium girls. Eventually many fought back, settled lawsuits, and brought the entire radium production industry down. Unfortunately, many innocent women lost their lives before this evil industry was brought down. A specific historical example: in 1843, a man called Hang Xiuquan claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus. This led to him starting the Taiping Rebellion, which caused the deaths of between 20 million and 70 million people. Then again, he probably believed it, so it might not count as a lie. Chinese history is fucking wild. The shit that happens always ends up getting 10 million plus people killed. It's how you get incredibly gruesome massacres like the Sichuan massacre. The 1964 Surgeon General's report concluded that smoking cigarettes causes death and disease. However, in a 1971 television interview, the president of Philip Morris denied the health risks that pregnant women and their babies face, saying that it's true that babies born from women who smoke are smaller, but they are just as healthy as the babies born to women who do not smoke. Some women would prefer to have smaller babies. Oxycontin isn't addictive. I was in a car accident, was given a prescription for Oxycontin. Doc told me get off it as soon as you can manage your pain with over-the-counter drugs. I was on it for 10 days. 10 days. I experienced withdrawal symptoms when I quit. Nestle, the baby killer scandal. They deliberately lied to mothers in developing countries to sell their baby formula, telling them that their own milk was nutritionally insufficient and their babies would be unhealthy if they continued to breastfeed them. The result of this marketing campaign was approximately 66,000 infant mortalities. When Thomas Medgley Jr. campaigned for lead to be put into fuel, knowing it has adverse effects on people and the environment, easily had more adverse impact on the atmosphere than any other single organism in Earth's history. 27. And Bill Bryson remarked that Medgley possessed an instinct for the regrettable that was almost uncanny. 28. Fred Peirce, writing for New Scientist, described Medgley as a one-man environmental disaster. 3. Did he know the total outcome of his decisions? No, but he is still responsible. The lead in this gasoline is perfectly safe. The book Industrial Strength Denial by Barbara Fries does a good job retelling the story among other corporate evildoings in history. The idea that we are separate and disconnected from each other and our environment. One of the most insidious aspects of this, and the one I think people rebel/get defense about the most, is that this separation is because we are masters of our environment. Which feeds into the notion that we can just technology our way through every problem, because after all, if we are separate from our environment, we aren't part of nature. In reality, we are so fundamentally interconnected to our environment and every part of it. We delude ourselves that we aren't. We separate ourselves from it, and I truly feel this damage goes far beyond just physical. I think it harms the social and mental health in very deep ways. If you don't have to care about your environment, take any responsibility or care for the basic parts of our world that we are interconnected to and rely upon, how can we connect with and care for others in deep and meaningful ways? Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. So many Redditors weren't alive at the time, but for those of us who were, so much of the country would basically view you as a traitor. If you questioned anything about Iraq, you'd be shocked how many people believed it and would fight you over it. You'd get the same attacks if you told someone almost all the hijackers were Saudis. I still don't understand how the PR campaign for the BS was so stupidly effective. Anthropocentrism. That the earth and nature exist to serve humans. I'm constantly astounded by how many people are walking around thinking the world should exist to service their needs. Nature and just most plain other humans don't give a ruck about you. We're a tiny blip in the history of the universe, and as an individual you're an even tinier one. One out of roughly 8 billion just as of today, let alone the rest of human history and its future. One of the worst, in my opinion, is that babies need to cry it out in order to develop good sleep habits. The disconnection babies feel when they do that can lead to sociopathic behaviors. They cry for so long that they end up fainting. Their brains are rushed with cortisol over and over until they just learn that no one is coming to help them. Children can have broken sleep up into their toddler years and early childhood. Young babies need to be fed around the clock and need to be changed. There are lots of studies as to why it is harmful, yet people swear by one due ducking further. Also edit, I'm not here to judge people who made this choice. This is from my own informed decision about my children, and I'm allowed to state what I chose and why I feel that way. That free healthcare is communism. You have poor dying people who could be saved but will fight tooth and nail against free healthcare. The parasitic insurance companies and their paid for politicians are laughing their asses off on the way to the bank. The most wild thing I hear from people against universal healthcare is, why should I pay for someone else's healthcare when that's literally what you're doing already, just through a private company? Myth. Attitudes toward slavery in the US could be summed up by the fact that slaves were only considered 3/5 of a person. Fact. Slaves were not considered people at all. The argument was, how much should the enslaved population factor into determining a slave state's representation in the federal government? Because slaves could not vote, this only benefited the free population in slave states. Slave owners wanted the number to be 1. Abolitionists wanted it to be 0. They compromised with 3/5. Thank you.